What drives me in this work and makes me so passionate is I know we can make sure that every child in the state gets a great education, because that's what most people want. I served in the California legislature for 8 years and realized that most of my colleagues, no matter what political party, they cared about kids, yet I saw decisions being made that didn't help kids. Children Now is a children's organization. We do research, policy, and advocacy, but what's unique about us is we really cover the whole child. We work on early learning, K through 12 issues, children's health issues, children's welfare issues throughout California, really trying to move the ball to make sure that there's support for every single child in the state.
One of the policy areas that Children Now works on and leads is in education reform, and we were instrumental in getting the local control funding formula passed.
With the leadership of Governor Brown, Children Now from the outside brought together business and parent and community voices to really push policymakers to enact this new system called the local control funding formula. It's a much more transparent and equitable system.
It finally provides power back to the parent to determine what they would like to see in terms of quality education.
There's 3.5 million kids in this state who are low income, 1.3 million kids who are English language learners, and 43,000 kids who are foster care kids. This new law is targeting more support to them and will benefit all of them in their education. What Children Now is doing, and really this is happening for the first time, is bringing all these voices together with a very focused agenda to really make sure that every child in this state has a great education. I'm very optimistic that we are really going to have an excellent education system in this state. Good. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having the patience for one more presentation tonight. So I appreciate it. So as I said at the end of that video, I am optimistic that we can get every kid a great education, but we have a lot of work to do. I grew up in San Mateo, down the road, the 60s and 70s, in what I call the age of children. Great public schools, lots of health supports at the schools, support for kids. 3 big differences today. One, relatively, our education system's not as good. I've got 3 kids, 19, 17, and 13, and my wife and I have struggled to make sure they get a great education in this state. And compared to other states, we are now battling Mississippi and Alabama in the bottom 5 states in terms of our reading and math scores. Second big difference, it matters so much more today, because not every kid got a great education in the 60s and 70s, but if they didn't, it was a personal tragedy for them and their family. But the Bay Area, California, United States, we did fine with just some kids doing well. Today, given demographic changes, not enough kids, economic changes, if a kid doesn't reach their full potential, if we're not giving them those supports, we're all in trouble. So it's not just a moral and personal tragedy anymore, but it really threatens the Bay Area and California and United States place and the country and area that we want. Third difference, and that's why I'm so thrilled with your focus tonight, because back then we don't know what we know today. And that is the most important part of education is the first 5 years. And you've heard it here today already, that if a kid doesn't have the right health and education supports early on, they're going to start kindergarten already behind, probably not be reading at grade level in 3rd grade, and then not on the path to success. There's a huge gap in terms of services in birth to 5. So my wife Nicole and I spent a lot of money making sure that our 3 kids had quality childcare, quality preschool, and the health supports they needed in the early years. That's what most families that can afford it do, and that's really rare. Only 15% of 3- and 4-year-old low-income kids in this state have access to quality preschool, for example. There's a whole lot of kids tomorrow who, at that young age, are going to be plopped in front of a TV set with a friend or relative, while other kids are getting quality supports. So the need is intense, urgent, and really, really big. We're not talking 50 kids, 500 kids, 50,000 kids. We're talking literally hundreds of thousands of kids in the Bay Area and millions throughout this state who don't have the supports. So I think what you guys get, and even though we get so frustrated with government and politics at times, we know when you have a need that big, that the way to get change really quick and to scale quality programs is through policy change. Policy change happens when there's pressure. And here's the problem. Unlike all the other interests, the pressure on behalf of kids to date hasn't worked. Quick story from my time in the Assembly, true story from one afternoon. 3 meetings in a row. First meeting, Chamber of Commerce, came in. Assemblyman Lempert, these are the 2 things you need to do to keep our strong economy strong and business community strong in this state. Next meeting, the Prison Guards Union. This is what you need to do to make sure we're safe, your constituents are safe. Third meeting, a group of children's advocates. Assemblyman Lempert, we know you have such a tough job. We don't know how you do it. It's got to be so difficult. And then they went around the room, 20 different ideas, 20 different things to do. And as someone who wanted to help kids, I was totally confused. We have so many groups, so many people, so many folks out there that care about kids and all these great direct service programs, which is amazing. But when it comes to making large-scale change and policy change, it's a mess. Children Now is changing that here in the Bay Area and in California by basically doing what the other interest groups do. So 3 things. 1, simple messaging. When the chamber talks to policymakers, it's pro-business. Other groups, pro-labor, pro-environment, pro-gun, you name it. It's 2 words. Children Now takes really complex issues and makes them 2 words, pro-kid. We're talking about children, not the complicated home visiting or quality teaching, developmental screenings, kids. We're talking about kids. 2, policy expertise. You saw in that video this big law that we led the advocacy to get passed. We had on our team the guy that used to be in charge of the education finance laws and for the legislature. So when we went to a meeting getting that bill passed, we knew more than the people we were meeting with. That's what other interests do. When they're meeting with policymakers or key leaders, they have the real expertise. We need that for kids. Third and most difficult is that outside pressure. So how do we get all those groups together? We've done something very simple, and it's called the Children's Movement. We ask groups and individuals, do you want kids prioritized? Yes, then become part of this children's movement. And then after that, it's opt-in. Do you want to join in and push these policies? Advocacy is really scary and confusing to folks. It's probably confusing to a lot of you. It's confusing to nonprofits. It's confusing to business leaders who want to make a change, businesses for kids. We make it really simple. Here's a quick way to contact your school district, your school board, your legislature, your governor. And when you do it, you're going to have power because you're joining lots of other parents and community leaders and businesses. You're all coming together at once. That's how we got that law passed. And then this June, with the leadership of Janina Perez, who leads our early childhood work, who's here, we brought together 350 organizations around this state saying, now's the time we need to invest more in quality child care and preschool. And we got over $300 million investment in the state budget this year, putting pressure on the governor, which means access for over 17,000 kids. So we're just getting started with this. While we've had a lot of success in this model does work, we need to scale this model so we can scale programs and policy change for kids. And what that means is having folks on the ground, getting more and more groups and signed up for the children's movement, and then being able to weigh in on our state and local advocacy campaigns. I spend a lot of time in this job thinking about my kids and just like in awe of what most parents have to deal with today, because my wife and I have so many advantages in raising our kids. More than half the kids in this state live in families that don't make enough money to meet the basics, more than half, and dealing with so much stress in their lives. So what I'm asking you tonight, and this crowd gets it, which is why I'm also optimistic about the future, is as we fret about that and feel bad about that, is to recognize we can actually change that. And most people, including most people in elected office, wants to change it. We just need to get strategic and organized, and we've got a model that has worked. And so I'm very optimistic that we can lead the way here in the Bay Area, scale the movement here, scale it throughout the state, and be a model for the rest of the country. Thank you. Yes, in the back.
Given the structure of the school system, do you feel that, kind of like Bali Green School, that everyone has a different strength in different areas to thrive in instead of the structure on which how schools are currently?
Yeah, I like to say that every kid is a special education a kid in the sense that every kid needs to be treated with their own what do they need and what support they need. That having been said, there are some basics. Schools need financing, but kids need access to programs that can allow for that individuality. So a lot of what we're pushing for is not at the programmatic basis where that's best left to teachers, but there needs to be funding and quality standards so the people providing it can decide on the inputs, but we need to just make sure that kids are progressing and that they are reading by 3rd grade, because that's a must. And there is a policy role for that, which is essential and not being done right now. Other questions? See. All right, thank you. Oh, one more, sorry. It's hard to see with the lights.
Ted, is there a piece of legislation that you see in the next couple of years that we could help pass that would have the greatest impact on helping the most disadvantaged children get to kindergarten ready?
Yeah, yes, but I'm going to challenge the question for a little bit, because that's also how we think about children's advocacy. And a lot of groups will say, if we do this one thing, or a lot of philanthropists say, if we do these one thing. Children now, we think about it like a parent does. You know, if my kid's mental health is okay one day, or their safety's okay one day, I'm not like done, right? It's a lot of things. So there's a lot of bills and budget items that we need to get passed. And so this is really complex work. But that's what we do at the Children's Movement, because we push out a way, here's how to get quality childcare, push, and we got $300 million. Here's how to make sure every kid gets a developmental screening when they're infant. You know, sign here, and we get hundreds of groups to push that. These other interest groups I talked about, and I saw it firsthand, Chamber of Commerce does not have 2 or 3 items on their agenda. They have a whole lot of things. And if you don't do all of them, you're not pro-business. Labor, if you don't do a whole lot of things, you're not pro-labor. Imagine if you don't support from home visiting, childcare, preschool, good schools, all the way through all these issues. If you don't support all of them, you're not pro-kid. Most people want to be pro-kid. So that's what we're doing. We're recognizing how complex this is. There's not one silver bullet. There's a whole lot of bills and budget items that can be passed. We can't try to make this, you know, minimize the challenge that we've got, but we can do it because other interests have done it. More people care about kids than they care about anything else. So let's bring it together, work on all these issues, get the voices together. And we've had proof this works in the last couple of years. We need to expand this, and I'm actually very optimistic because what I see in Sacramento and locally and among the community is most people want all kids to have a great education and support. That doesn't get leveraged and communicated. And we now have a model that can do that. Great, thank you.